Hey everyone, Dr. Josh Mattson here with Infinity Chiropractic Center. I just got asked a little bit ago. I had a child come in, has developmental delays. They're delayed in walking, delayed in crawling, all those types of things. And it was a foster, it was an adopted child. But they asked me, why do kids have developmental delays? Why, what created this issue in the first place? What started that? So I want to talk about the risk factors that increase your child's risk of having a developmental delay. I don't have the information in front of me, so I'm going to give it to you pretty generic, but there is actual statistics out there for all of this. So preconception, things that increase your risk of having a child with a neurodevelopmental disorder, meaning that their brain doesn't develop the way that it should. They're not hitting their movement milestones, they're not hitting their speech milestones, they're not hitting their developmental milestones on time. Is kind of what's classified as a developmental delay. But what the things that prior to conception, the health of the parents plays big into it. So if a mother is overweight or obese, that increases their risk. If a father's overweight or obese, it increases the risk. And there's an actual number, and I can't remember the number off the top of my head. If the mother has any autoimmune issues, if they have Hashimoto's, if they have hypothyroidism, if they have those types of things. Same with the blood sugar dysregulation. If either the parents have blood sugar issues, they have diabetes, that type of stuff. Any autoimmune issue or infectious diseases increases your risk of having a child with developmental delays, because all of those can affect how that infant actually develops. So health of the parents is really important. If you are advanced age, it can increase your risk of developmental delays. If it's males, I think it's 40. Anything over 40 increases your risk of having a child with developmental issues. Women, I believe it's 35, if I remember correctly. But anyways, those advanced ages increases your risk of having a child with developmental delays. Once you get into pregnancy, things that can create issues is medication uses can increase your risk of developmental delays. Any infections while pregnancy, sicknesses during pregnancy, gestational diabetes can increase your risks, preeclampsia, those are all have been associated with increasing your risk of having a child with developmental delays. After they're born, exposure to, or even during pregnancy, but exposure to large amounts of environmental toxins, exposure to, especially after birth, you want to avoid those. If they're not after birth, if they're not held appropriately, if they're not moved appropriately, if they're not soothed appropriately, those can all increase your risk of developmental delays. That's why a lot of kids that are adopted or in foster systems, usually the parents that they come from, they were taken for a reason, is that they weren't taken care of appropriately. And those can increase your risk of developmental delays. And there's even a study out there that's really well known, is that in Russia there was all these kids in an orphanage, and they were put in a crib, and they were never played with, they were never soothed or moved, and a huge majority of them had this is what they described it as, was mental retardation, which is not an actual term that you use nowadays, but that's what it was in the studies, is what it was termed. But that they all had developmental issues because they were never developed appropriately. They never were laid on their stomach. They were on their backs all the time. They didn't learn to roll. They didn't learn to army crawl. They didn't learn to crawl. And so not doing those tasks, those are what help to develop the brain. You use a lot of primitive reflexes to develop those. So not being able to, or not developing them well in those first years because, they're not guided in the right process. So, which is really common during foster care or during adoptive type of scenarios. But those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, the things that create developmental or are associated with developmental delays. And I'm sure there's a lot more that I can't think of right now. But so if you're planning on having a child, you are planning on, or you're currently pregnant, these are things that you want to look out for. If you're going to have a child, you want to make sure that you're exercising prior to it and getting healthy and getting inflammation out of your diet, and so that you're not at risk for autoimmune issues, you're not at risk for diabetes type of scenarios, and you're not overweight. Those are huge things that can decrease your risk of having a child with developmental delays. During pregnancy, you want to try to stay as healthy as possible, obviously, but avoiding any major infections, avoiding medication use, avoiding a lot of those types of things. And then after it, making sure that you're have a good understanding of pediatric development, the motor milestones they're supposed to hit, and making sure that you're having someone check that to make sure they're developing the way that they should. A lot of the issues kids face now, like reading issues or behavioral issues or learning issues or those types of things, they can massively be avoided if you just have them checked in the early months to years of life. So I hope this helps some people. You guys have an awesome day, and God bless.